Well, God's victory and his kindness is of the future, but they're also for the present, for now. And we're in verses 2 to 8 and 10 to 11. So the next layer in from the ends of the chapter. Do you remember back in chapter 5, we read about God's vineyard? And we were told in chapter 5, verse 7, the vineyard of the Lord Almighty is the nation of Israel, and the people of Judah are the vines he delights in. Well, once again, we have the vineyard here in chapter 27. This is God's people, his Old Testament and his New Testament people, us. And look at how kind God is to us. Verse 3. He watches over us, he waters us, he guards us, and stops anyone from harming us, including Satan. He's got our backs. He provides for us. That bit about watering us, it is again talking about his word. God waters us by his word. Listen to Isaiah 55. Come all who are thirsty, come to the waters, come down from heaven, and do not return to it without watering the earth and making it bud and flourish, so that it yields seed for the sower and bread for the eater. So is my word that goes out from my mouth. It will not return to me empty, but will accomplish what I desire and achieve the purposes for which I sent it. God generously waters and nourishes us with his word. That's why we make such a big deal of the Bible here at St. Luke's and St. Andrew's. As we hear God's word read and preached, as we gather around it in growth groups, as we open it with Sunday groups and with Impact and with Rockets, in PCC meetings and in prayer gatherings, and anywhere else we have the opportunity, as we open God's word, so God is protecting and nourishing us with it. He looks after us by giving us his fierce, great and powerful word. He's kind to us in the present. And Jesus picks this up in John 15. He says that he is the vine and we are his branches. And if we remain in him, so we are nourished. If we remain in his word, so we are nourished, says Jesus. Just a word to you, if you're moving away from Kirkheller or Willoughby, maybe to be a student somewhere else, or for work, or for another reason, please make it a priority, a top priority, the top priority, to find a church where God's word is absolutely central, where it's opened and explained and preached and applied and lived by. God protects you and nourishes you by his word. If you take yourself away from a strong word ministry, so you're taking yourself away from God's protection and his nourishment. And that never, ever ends well for you or for your family. If you're not someone who's following Jesus yet, then there's an offer for you here too. Look at verses 4 to 5 with me. Briars and thorns stand for those who aren't following God yet. But God says to you, let them come to me for refuge. Let them make peace with me. Yes, let them make peace with me. The alternative is to face God as his enemy, isn't it? But you don't have to. God's kind offer extends to you. God's kindness is for now. It's for those who follow Jesus, and it's offered to those who don't. And it's proved in how God had protected his people throughout the ages. Verse 6, in days to come, Jacob will take root. Israel, Jacob and Israel's nicknames for God's people, will bud and blossom and fill all the world with fruit. Has the Lord struck her, as he struck down those who struck her? Has she been killed, and those were killed who killed her? The answer to those rhetorical questions is no. God hasn't killed or struck down his people. God's people have stood throughout all time, despite what is thrown at us. Just read through the historical books of the Old Testament and then through Acts, and see how God protected his faithful people in ways that are beyond what humans could ever have managed for themselves. The same is true throughout church history too. Grab yourself a church history book. I can lend you one or two if you like, some easy reader ones if you want, or something a bit more in depth. And again, you will see that God's people have stood despite whatever's thrown at them. Look around the world today, the persecuted church. God's people stand. God's people grow, bear fruit, even under great persecution. God has kept us going, even when it looks like we're on the brink. Don't be afraid, but trust in God's word. His kindness is for now. And his kindness is shown also in the defeat of the church's enemies, of his people's enemies. Look at verses 10 to 11. They're a picture of a once glorious city that fought against God's people. A picture of Babylon, or the capital of Assyria, or Egypt, or somewhere. A picture of anywhere. And it's gone, replaced by grazing animals, open even to the least likely people to wander around it and make fires. And dried up, tinder dry, without God's word. A decade ago, it was the New Atheists, wasn't it, who were looking forward to the final defeat of Christianity. Where are they now? Not even Richard Dawkins has made much of a splash for over 10 years. History is littered with people and movements who wanted to destroy the church. Individuals, organisations, political entities, powers and authorities. And every single one of them has failed miserably. Every single one of them in the future will fall too. Don't be afraid, but trust in God's word. His kindness and victory are for now. When we come back, we'll tie things up a bit.